It's the second episode of the Source Material series, produced in partnership with Firestone Walker, and this interview was recorded live in Yakima, Washington during harvest this past fall. It's the 30th anniversary year for Firestone Walker, and one of the many ways they're marking the occasion is by sharing the focus with the hop growers and brokers around the world that play such a crucial role in the highest quality ingredients that the brewery uses in all of its beers. One of the keys to maintaining a consistent supply of the very best hops is long-term relationships and deep commitment, paired with the very best analytical science and process improvement. And the purpose of this series is to explore just what that means with some of the key players in this story of ingredient quality. In this episode, I sat down with Firestone Walker head brewer Dustin Kral and Bud Hollingbery of hop broker Hollingbery and Son. And we talk about the ways that Hollingbery has worked closely with Firestone Walker for decades now to source and process hops, how current dynamics in the brewing and hop industry are impacting hop growers, and a whole lot more. Over the years, Bud has seen some remarkable change in the hop industry. He is not afraid to tell you exactly what he thinks. Let's jump right in. Joining me is Dustin Kral, head brewer for Firestone Walker. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you for having me.
And Bud Hollingbery of Hollingbery and Son. Welcome, Bud.
Thank you.
Bud, you've got a long history here, and your whole family has a multi-generational history here in Yakima, and we're going to talk about that and the impact and the connection that it has with Firestone Walker. But I just, before we start, want to note that it's harvest season here in Yakima. Hops are in the air. You can't walk through Yakima without smelling hops in some way. And as we even walk down the street, you can just smell hops wafting out of your warehouses down here. And it's truly a wonderful smell and a wonderful time of year and a beautiful time to be here in Yakima. Must have some fond memories for you around that.
Oh yeah, the smell of hops goes back to when I was probably 5 years old in the Larson building, which is the skyscraper of Yakima. And my granddad's office was on the third floor, and you get off the elevator on the third floor and, geez, what's that smell? And it just permeated the whole third floor. And I don't know if he was asked to leave or for some reason he bought the warehouse across the street and moved there in the 50s. But the hop aroma is strong, and you do attenuate, your senses attenuate that, because we can walk down the street and I don't smell it and you do, but that could be COVID, who knows? Yeah, but anyway, so it goes back a long ways for me. It goes back in my memory to probably 6 years old, which would have been in 52. And the hop industry has been attractive to me for a number of reasons. The family connection. My granddad did it, and my dad did it, and then the fact that the hop growers are pretty much the same families today, for the most part, that were doing it when I first started, and there's a reason these people stay in. I mean, it's not money, because I added up the number of up and down cycles since the statistics I had went back to 1953. And between 53 and 2012, there were, I think, 16 cycles on the sine curve, and with market going up, down 16 times. And over those years, families have survived and some haven't, but the ones that are here today have survived. And so you develop relationships with those people and generations of those people. And so it's an opportunity for people to relate to the human dignity of other people in an industry. And that's a really good thing.
This industry in the Yakima Valley goes back to late 1800s when it all moved from the east out here, and the families are and the farms are such an interesting, interconnected group. There's lots of relationships between the various families and marriages between these families, and it's
its own little microcosm of of social nature. But you all have been here, and Hollingbery and Son has been here for a good chunk of that time.
Oh yeah, we've been here. My granddad left Pullman, where he was a head football coach for I think 17 years, in 1942 when it shut down for the war. And followed a friend of his, a banker who bought the Yakima Chief Ranch in Mapton, which is at the time the largest ranch in the world, probably over 400 acres. And then he never went back. And even though my dad went through here, he was hitchhiking down to the Bay Area where they lived before my granddad moved up, and they had property down there and a summer home. And he hitchhiked through here when he was 16, and it was a record-setting hot day, and he couldn't understand why anyone would ever live in this hellhole. That was prior to him living here from about 1944 till he died. So it's an interesting place.
A warm place, but also a good place to grow hops without, some of the agronomic pressure that hits it in more,
no mildew.
Exactly.
And dry climate with water and great dirt and the right latitude.
So post-war hops were quite a bit different than the hop world is today in terms of varieties, in terms of the way they're grown, in terms of who the customers were. Because at that point we'd seen just massive consolidation of the number of breweries, and and so this industry over that same time when you were showing a 16 ups and down cycles on that sine curve, even the dynamics driving some of that are different now than they were in those days.
Oh, much so. And, there were 250 growers when I started in the late 60s. And now there are maybe 50. And the brewing community's totally changed. It's gone from many breweries to 3 or 4 major breweries to 10,000 breweries now. And all these changes are significant. And it's really pleasurable, and that may not be the right word, but enjoyable to live through all these changes and see what persists and stays constant and what doesn't, and what's valuable and what isn't. And that's when you graduated from college, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'm not disappointed that I've been in the hop business all these years, and one of the areas of change is how you make money growing hops, and this is non-controversial. I'll stay out of the good, the bad, and the ugly, but when in 63 and 64, 65, there was a lot of politicking in the hop community about a marketing order, and it went in 1966. And I remember it well, even though I was in high school during those years, because of the camp for it and the camp against it, and how they come together and compromised on something, but they didn't compromise on whether there was a marketing order or not. There was a marketing order, and that was for the industry as a whole. Each one had a certain amount of base, and that's how much a percentage of that could be grown every year, and created opportunities for kind of independent people like us. We were kind of intermediary in a black market for hops. If a grower grew more than his allotment and another grower grew less, if they had known that in March, they could have changed leased base from one to another, but you don't know that in March. You know that in September. And so at night, there'd be a truckload of hops going from ranch plus hops to ranch minus hops. And we usually knew everything that was going on, and because it was a little under the radar, but not really. And if the people we were buying hops for then needed more, well, we'd facilitate that. we're well past the statute of limitations. I mean, and it was one of those things where everyone gained.
Right.
And anyway, so we
You
had
were creating market efficiency because there were some restrictions that were reducing that kind of fluidity.
That's right. We were helping the beer industry and the growers at the same time. But that, and we were one of the few firms that could do that because we were totally independent. We weren't buying and selling. We were brokering. And so that left us in a position where there was quite a bit of trust in us because we weren't gaining financially from it, but we were having, we were enjoying business. And then the marketing order went out into Reagan years, free enterprise, and it didn't work in that philosophy, and then there were antitrust suits about that time. Mm-hmm. There were, things were changing, but as an independent hop broker, only making a margin of a couple of cents a pound, we enjoyed a unique position in the hop industry, and we did that for my granddad's generation, my dad, and mine. And then it changed a little bit as consolidation at all levels took place, and then the craft beer industry came along, and that's the most significant input into the hop industry in my lifetime by far. I mean, you go from 0.15 pounds per barrel to 10 pounds per barrel, an average of 1.6 instead of, that's 10, 11, 12 times per barrel. And from 3 breweries to 10,000. I just wish the Apple industry could happen across something like that because that's unheard of. And so our position in the industry evolved into buying hops and selling hops, which has its pluses and minuses. Mostly, I really don't know how it adds up. And dealing with craft breweries, and that's where Firestone and our relationship started. And then shortly after that, we quit brokering. For at the time it was John I. Haas, and we were buying a significant amount for them. And I remember in probably the summer of 2007, a hop grower friend of mine was on a board with Adam Firestone, and Adam was having a hard time finding hops and contemplating buying a hop ranch, as I understand it. And Kevin, it was Kevin Reel, who was on the same board, said, "Well, why don't you call Bud?" And that's a pretty significant change going from making beer to growing hops and making beer. And so we found a way for them to connect with a grower and get the hops they needed, except it wasn't quite that simple because you want 08 hops but you really want 07 hops because you're not going to get 08s till 09 really. And so they needed some 08, 07 hops. And
we should know that was a hop shortage year, a pretty significant one.
A significant hop shortage year. And that's why they couldn't get hops. And I just happened to know a grower that had 20,000 pounds of Cascades, and a really good grower. He's a grower whose hops would be taken, bought by any brewery and do well. And it was high price, but a reasonable price at the time. And I got out of that because I didn't want to be competing with Haas at the time, but got them together, and the relationship has grown from there. I'm just glad that Firestone Brewing is a first-rate brewery with first-rate people, because that was our introduction into selling to craft breweries. And
they've experienced quite a bit of growth over those years, from 2007 to today.
I think they probably went from maybe 60,000 barrels to maybe 600. I don't know.
We're slightly less than 600, and we were probably right around that 60,000 mark at the time. Yeah.
Dustin, tell me about the relationship with Hollingbery from the Firestone Walker perspective. Now, Hollingbery is not a hop grower, but, as Bud says, they have worked with so many farms all over the world, not just in North America, to find great hops and, create these opportunities and connect brewers to those hops. Talk to me about how you all work with them in that relationship.
Yeah, well, like Bud said, we've been getting hops from them at a time that we could not, and we've been buying hops from them ever since. It used to be, Cascade, Centennial, Chinook, and obviously things morph and change, and now we're getting a lot more Cashmere, Eldorado, Zaka, things like that. And every brewery goes through some changes and sees clientele's preference change, and having a great business partner that can work with you on those sort of dynamics is pretty massive. And, we were just kind of talking earlier, and Bud touched up about contracts and this and that. And those are essentially business agreements that we draw up together. And if things change, they're somewhat flexible to help us with our change. We're likewise sensitive to their needs and try to promote hops that might, be beneficial for our business, that is more sustainable, and things that we can use to make great beer. So it's like the relationship is not one-sided; it's a very two-sided relationship. And they have their hands in a lot of different farmers' crops. They're able to present us with a lot of different options, and we're able to find what works best for our process. And they've become like family to us, and they know our preference, what we like. And when we show up, I'm up here in Bud's world right now, and I'm just a visitor for 1 week. So I'm constantly trying to, learn more from them and understand the culture and the dynamics and the business side of it. All the while, I just want to find some really good hops to make some great beer with. And they've been super, beneficial as a business partner in that aspect.
That long-standing relationship means you also kind of learn what each other want and are interested in, and from your perspective, they can, for some of these hop varieties, you can communicate what you're looking for, and they've got a perspective on where you might be able to get that kind of thing.
Totally. And what type of beer we're trying to make and what we want to see from hops. And, they have all the eyes and ears on the ground. They know way more than I ever will about hops. So when they have a good idea of something that might work for us, we listen. And likewise, when we have demands or needs that we need met and things that we want to start seeing, they go out and hunt it down and shop for us and find, the best quality for our process. I've known Bud not as long as Matt and Adam have, but, he's become somebody that I value tremendously, and I trust immensely. And his son is one of my best friends, and Matt Hollingbery is somebody that, if I weren't already married and I was going to get married, he'd be there on that day, because this isn't just business partners now. They become, business family, and we're honored to continue that relationship and do business with them.
For sure. But talk to me about the evaluation process from, as someone who is working with farms and bringing those hops in, and you're thinking about a client like, or a partner like Firestone Walker, and what they're looking for in hops from some of these farms that you're working with. What does that process look like? How do you, look at these bales, some of these lots, think about, this is great. Because it doesn't just start once the bales roll into a warehouse. It starts long before that.
No, it does. And following up a little bit on what Dustin said, the communication, the relationship we have is almost maximizes how a relationship should work, because the communication's really good, and there's got to be flexibility in it. and we have that. This would be an industry that I'd encourage Matt's son to go into if the relationships were all just like that. And because of
you mean your son, Matt?
My grandson,
Yeah.
Cole.
Okay.
Yeah, his son.
There's lots of Matts here. Dustin
Yeah.
was talking about Matt Brittleton. You're talking about your son, Matt Hollingbery. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's because it's really a wonderful working relationship. Right. You have to be open and understand each other's positions and move forward. So if how do we try to source the hops they want, given our experience? Well, that's where we have people in New Zealand. We were traveling there. We're traveling to Croatia. We're in Germany. We're in Czech Republic. We're doing that. They're doing that. In fact, we do it together sometimes. And but then for American hops, you know the growers. You have an idea of what kind of product they put out. And I would say that 90% of the growers put out a product that you can make great beer. 100% put out a product you can make great beer with. 90% put out 90% of their product that you can make great beer with. The people that have survived these generations know how to grow hops. And so we, buy from people we know grow good hops. And in my experience, for years I was trying every bale. I'd try 5 million pounds of bales, 200 pounds at a time, pulling out a handful of every bale every year, and smelling them and feeling them, and you get an idea of what you like, what's a good hop. And then we put all these different lots on a table, and I watch these breweries go through the lots, and all of a sudden I realize I don't know a damn thing. I don't even know the vernacular or the language they're speaking. But I do know, we know what good hops are. And so fortunately we're in an area now that's evolved to a point where everybody has the tools to do it right. And so it's more a matter of finding out which lots aren't up to where they should be and not sampling them. It's pretty simple, actually.
Yeah, or at least making sure that the right lots get onto the table for the right brewers who are interested in that. Because even though hop could also not fit a certain brewer's idea of what they want from that hop, but there might be another brewer where it does fit in the goal that they have for that same hop. Dustin, how do you all think about some of these hops, and have you built a way to select within certain varieties so that that variety has a Firestone Walker character to it, or fits into the specific beer that you have it geared for?
Yeah, totally. Hop selection in Yakima is a lot different than it used to be a decade plus ago, and there wasn't a lot of brewers coming up here and doing what they're doing now. You'll have a brewery making, 3, 4, 5,000 barrels a year that still come up to Yakima and select hops. It's because they want something that's specific to their flavor profile. And, you can get a hop variety, early pick, late pick, that are two totally different hops. And there's a couple characteristics that Firestone and, we like to stay away from, and, super kind of grungy, diesel-y, like onion garlic, kind of late pick stuff on some of the varietals just doesn't really suit our beer styles as well. We took advantage of the time before that because we would get these bale cuts from Bud and team and other suppliers as well that would send them to the brewery, and we'd get together on a round table and break them up and smell them as a group, which is super beneficial for our selection process. Because, Matt Brentelson, my boss, is, his background's a hop chemist. So he knows the hop very well, and he knows what he wants to see, the attributes that he wants to gain from those hops. So in that process of sitting there and smelling all the hops as a young brewer, 20 years ago, I got to learn how to identify what characters he's looking for. And through that, I can help direct my team to what characters we're looking for. It becomes essentially like a house palette, and you just kind of learn what to kind of weed out and what is really super desirable. And obviously every human being has a different sensory and a different palette, and they can identify one hop as beautiful while somebody else says, doesn't agree with that. At Firestone, we've kind of built a selection team that kind of work a little bit harmonious, and we are constantly together sniffing on hops. And although we might have 10 hops on the table, I'd say out of all of us, we're going to have a very common 1 and 2 within that mix. So we have the benefit of kind of having a harmonious palette and having learned through Matt's experience and his teachings on what hop varietals that we kind of want to bring into house.
Doing lots of sensory together in order to get locked in and, and all, pulling in the same direction.
Yep. And then because we come out and do our selection with, the same people over and over, they start to identify our characteristics and our tendencies. And look, you don't need to put these on the table. They're not going to like them. They're, super overly dank or whatever. And this is more their wheelhouse. And certainly we like to explore all options, but typically they're very right. And like they can guess pretty closely to which ones what we might lean towards and tend towards. And I think that's benefit, not only with the Hollingberries. We've spent a lot of time with other suppliers, and we tried to familiarize them with our style preferences on some of these varietals.
It's funny, the more we talk to brewers and growers here, the more a lot of those stories become, they hit a common theme, and more brewers than not end up blindly selecting the same field from the same farm year after year, because once they get locked in on that still continues to have the character that they're looking for over and over again. But how much do you see this kind of consistency in Firestone? Are there, from their perspective, and again, you can't give up all their secrets of where they're coming from, but do they select pretty consistently with certain farms and around some of these core varieties?
You're talking to the wrong Hollingbery on that. I was learning a lot from Dustin as he was talking. I'm not that person anymore.
Sure.
In the hop business, there's that person, and I was that person for a number of years, and Matt is now. And I would say that everything Dustin said, I see, because we have the same crew, we have 5 or 6 salespeople that are here for selections, and they have a very good idea of the preferences of the different breweries, and I don't. Like I said, dank, garlicky, oniony, I pick up a hop and I like it or I don't, and I don't go into the analysis that Matt Brynildson has started in Firestone Walker, but they do.
Well, what makes a hop something that you like versus something you don't like?
Well, I like it 9.5% moisture. I like it cooled for at least 24 hours. It's picked, it's dried, it's dumped in a cooling pile of some sort, and it should be there for at least 24 hours. And 9.5% moisture, picked at the right time. It's important. You can pick early, you can pick late, and have 2 different hops, the same variety. And I like that aroma to hit me in the face and put a smile on my face. I mean, there are hop varieties that breweries don't really gravitate towards, and I know it could make an excellent beer if it's handled the way I said it is. And I remember when Chinooks were first out, and in this location, I was trying them. And it was such a refreshing aroma after years of clusters and galenas. And so it's just one of those things that you smell and it takes you to a different world. And that hops can do that. Now, I'm not a brewer. I don't have a beer that has to be repeated, so that the customer drinks it and buys another one, and oh yeah, it's great, just like the first one. I'd probably be if I were still drinking beer, make me one out of that hop. I want to try that, and it's turned it over to the younger generation, and Matt and the team are doing a good job. The communication has to be great between us and the brewery, and off you go.
Yeah. Now, this year, actually over the last couple of years, we've seen more and more acres of hops come out of the ground that brewers exuberantly overcontracted in years past, expecting growth in their own breweries that did not materialize, and they thought they were going to need more hops. Growers put those in the ground in order to meet that demand that they thought was coming, maybe even put a little more in the ground than they should have based on what that prospective demand was. And now over the last couple of years, we're bringing those acres back down to a manageable balance between hops being produced and hops being bought by brewers and being used. From your perspective in the industry today, how have you all navigated some of this kind of rebalancing? It's been hard. We saw Brulot Farms sell and shut down their hop operation. It's not always a wonderful, beautiful thing for everyone. This is the reality of the agriculture business. There are times where it gets hard, and it's been hard in those down cycles in the past. It's hard in those years where there's major shortages, and now it's hard when there's some oversupply, and figuring out how to get back to a more normal, balanced market. How are you all navigating that?
Well, we're navigating, and it's the first time since Hollingbery has been restructured towards a supplier to craft breweries that we've seen this kind of downturn. And so this company, you got to tighten your belt. You got to fill your warehouses, your CA rooms with fruit. You got to do whatever you can to get by. And the growers on the same thing. I mean, you mentioned Brulot Farms. A lot of growers are pulling hops out. I think the acreage, I haven't really studied the numbers, but I think the acreage is pretty well aligned with the demand right now. We just got to work through the inventory, and we should be close.
And we're still significantly up on acreage over 10 or 15 years ago, pre-craft beer.
Well, we're at the high end of pre-craft. We're at 42,000 acres, maybe. I don't know the exact number right now. We were at 60,000. The macro beers are oversupplied at 40,000. Maybe they're 30,000 acres, in the world supply. Maybe that's dropping a few percentage points because of the change in drinking habits. But going from 60,000 to 40,000 or 42,000 is significant. Going to an 80 million pound crop instead of 105 million is where, if anything, we're getting close. And I think we may even be there. But in the meantime, you see some people taking hops out and others, and they're taking hops out. And my good friend Pat Favilla just put in 80 acres of grapes, and he's selling beans. He can do 60 acres of beans out of his bean processing plant there in his farm. They're
driving through the valley. We've seen a number of farms with corn growing under hops trellises now, where they haven't pulled the trellises out, but they have planted other crops in the same place where hops were before.
Yeah, that's it's nice to know people do listen to me. At the Santa Rosa convention, a guy asked what he should plant, and I said corn, and it's being planted. But no, it's down cycles are interesting too. They're painful, but you see how each farm relates to it, and how creative people can get, and it's painful. But that's what's going on.
It's important to remember that these are people behind the farms and not just nameless, faceless entities growing things, putting it out there in a commodity, like when they're your friends and the people that you spend time with here, and that it means a lot. It's much more impactful when things go in a different direction.
Yeah, when and you're relating to each other now in a different perspective. It's not all wonderful. It's and this generational relationship that is the hop industry includes relating to each other in pain and pleasure afterwards, and I think it's that makes the hop industry, one of the things that makes the hop industry unique, because most industries are too big that the people aren't considered. I mean, it's not a people business in wheat, say, as opposed to hops, and I've been thankful to be a part of that for so long. And the breweries, the craft breweries are a part of it too. I mean, since they come along, the relationship with growers and brewers is significant and real, and it adds value to the industry, not just money. And it's a great thing.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, Hollingbery was here to help Firestone Walker when hops were hard to find in 2007, and that being there and showing up when they need you turns around now, and that relationship is still there when the direction goes different directions here with agriculture. But nice to see that relationship stays the same and moves in both of those directions, given whatever the cycles and the demands are.
Yeah, you're reading it pretty well.
Dustin, how is this? You're getting into selection now this year. How are things shaping up for Firestone Walker in a hops perspective this season?
Well, certainly, like everybody, we too are a little bit long on hops. So this isn't going to be our biggest year of selection. We're going to be strategic and adamant and get what we need to move forward, and try to be mindful of not over contracting. I mean, that's something that brewers, need to be aware of, is how detrimental it is when we do over contract and then pull the rug out from under suppliers. It's we need to kind of right the ship. This is a good year to really start that process and get what we need to make our beers, but be super communicative and strategic about what that is that you need, because everybody has a lot of leftovers from years before, and burning through old inventory isn't fun for anybody. And hops are only grown for one thing, so if you're not using them to make beer, then they just sit there and go old and wasted a bunch of people's time and effort and money. So make sure that as a brewer, you're being super communicative with your business partners and letting them know what it is that you need this year, next year, the following year. And of course, the brewing industry has been hit pretty hard with, the pandemic and other global events that have led to, the decline in some beer sales. So it wasn't anything that we could have forecast or saw coming, but just got to be ready to pivot and be nimble and move with the pendulum as required. So this year for us is, getting some good quality, fresh aroma hops so we can continue to make great quality beers, focus on our IPAs. Got our Mine Haze brand is doing extremely well. We're putting some new products out that way. Consumes a lot of hops in those beers. We're really trying to focus on some hop forward beers to, showcase great hops and get them back into the process as much as we can.
Are there some varieties from that you sourced through Hollingbery that this season you're particularly excited about?
I get excited when I get here and I start smelling them. Like Bud was saying, when we're in the selection room and you can just find a hop that is going to make a great beer. And I've been a big fan of their Cashmere and Eldorado for a long time, and really like making tropical, juicy, hazy IPAs with those sort of brands. And Idaho 7's something that I like a lot. And we're going to see what they have to offer. We literally got in midnight last night and, met you at 9 in the morning. So I haven't put my beak to anything yet, and I'm really eager to get after it when we're done here.
Well, that sounds like a good reason to wrap this up so you can get to that selection table and start rubbing some hops and making some decisions for the next year. Bud Hollingbery, Dustin Kral, thank you all for joining me for this episode. Cheers.
Thank you
cheers.
very much.
My pleasure.